Hi folks, Mark Little here again with another instructional video for the Decatur High School percussion class. This is the second assignment that I'm posting during our time of digital learning here in the spring of 2020. It's another snare drum etude. The last etude that I posted for you guys, the first one that you're supposed to be working on, was called rudimental Étude, and that is what's considered a rudimental etude. And by rudimental, we're talking about a sound that is more like what we think of a marching snare drum sounding like, with rolls and drags sounding open, being more like this. So the rolls are double strokes, nice and open, and the rudimentals have nice open roughs or drags, as the two grace notes in front of any of the rudimentals. Nice and round and open, with good space between the notes while still maintaining accurate rhythms and timing. So that's rudimental. That was the last one. This time there's some changes. This etude is a concert snare etude, and there's some differences between the way we approach concert snare drumming and rudimental or marching band style snare drumming, which I'll explain as we go through this etude while I'm teaching it to you. 99% of what we do is the same between the two different styles, but there's a couple of key differences that I'll point out. So the new etude that we're about to work on is called Concert Snare Etude 18. I will post a link to this sheet music in the description of this video, which is below the video here. You might have to click the description to open it up a little bit to expand it to be able to see the link perhaps. But there'll be a link to where you can go and view, print or download the sheet music for this that we're going through. Now, I recommend you go ahead and do that before you watch the rest of this video, so that you've got a copy of the Concert Snare Etude 18 in front of you to view, to reference while I'm talking through and explaining the different aspects of this. I'll be referring to specific measure numbers, specific counts within measures, and it won't mean a lot to you if you don't have a piece of sheet music to look at. So click on the link below to print out or view a copy of it if you haven't already. You can view it on another digital device if you don't have a printer. Excuse me, I'm going to clear my throat. This is allergies, not anything else, that I'm experiencing due to pollen. It's causing a little tickle in the top of my throat. There we go. Okay, so Concert Snare Etude 18. First, let me pause and say this. Of course, I'm playing on the pad for right now to minimize the distortion of sound due to the volume on playing on an actual snare drum. I'll also point out that this is my right hand and this is my left hand, in case you're concerned about whether or not you're looking at a mirror image, how video can flip things around, it can be unclear. My right is over here next to the R on my shirt. My left is over here, closest to the music stand and closest to the N on my shirt, okay? Now, having said that, you'll note that on the Concert Snare Etude 18, there's no sticking specified. I'm going to refer to make suggestions for stickings for certain little passages throughout this, where I'll refer to my right or my left hand. But you are not required to follow any specific sticking on this etude. You should choose the sticking that works best for you to make the piece sound the way that it should. Your grade is not going to be reduced in any way if you choose a different sticking than one that I might recommend at any point, as long as the music sounds the way it's supposed to. So there's that. That's one difference between the last etude, the rudimental etude. There's a very specific sticking we wanted you to follow. Okay. Key differences in the two key differences in concert style snare drumming versus rudimental style snare drumming. We've talked about in class before. I'll remind you of that now. The first most major difference is, unless the music specifies very specifically otherwise, we interpret all rolls in concert snare drumming as closed or buzz rolls. Occasionally an arranger or a composer might specify that they want something to be a 7-stroke or a 9-stroke roll, or they might specify it as specifically 30-second notes where we might choose to play a double-stroke roll, choose to play diddles to execute those 30-second notes. But most of the time, unless it's very specifically specified otherwise, we interpret rolls as buzz rolls in concert band. As a reminder, to achieve a buzz roll, it's okay to shift your technique a little bit from what we normally talk about, where we have a nice closed seam here in our hand. For buzz rolls, it's okay if you need to open to roll the stick down. Your fulcrum kind of shifts a little bit, and you open up your seam a little bit to get a good quality of sound in your buzz roll. If needed, that's okay. Adjust the pressure at your fulcrum to make the stick buzz, as opposed to the rudimental marching band style double strokes. Okay? So all our rolls in this etude are buzz rolls. I'm going to interpret them with a 16th note meter. I'll be counting or moving my hands in 16th notes underneath the buzz. 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4. 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4. 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4. That's how I'll be interpreting them. That's the meter that I think would work the best for the targeted tempo of 110 beats per minute for this etude. Now, when I'm playing it slower for you to explain some things, I'll still try to play 16th notes, 1 and 2, but the buzz roll will sound a little more, won't sound as smooth at the slower tempo with me playing 16th notes. But the reason I'm still going to choose 16th notes is because that's what I'm recommending for the targeted tempo. The second difference when we go to concert style drumming has to do with our roughs or our drags. Anytime you have 2 grace notes in front of a main stroke. When we think about those in a rudimental style, the space between the 2 grace notes, depending on the tempo, a lot of times is a little bit more open. Or but when we go to a concert style, we try to close up the space between those grace notes a little bit, so everything sounds a little tighter. Right? That's concert versus a more open rudimental style. Now, sometimes drags and roughs when they're interpreting them in a concert setting, they might even tighten them up so much that the 2 grace notes are buzzed and they almost sound like a little buzz in front of the main stroke, like this. That's pretty rare. And for the purposes of this assignment, let's not close up our grace notes so much that they buzz. We still want to hear 2 distinct grace notes. Just a slightly tighter interpretation than you would think of for rudimental. 2 distinct notes, just a little snugger, a little tighter. That will come into play when we get to the 3rd measure of the first line, and I'll discuss that. Well, I'll go ahead and discuss it now. Let's go ahead and jump it to the 3rd measure on the first line, measure 3 on the concert snare etude. The phrase you have is, you've got a little rhythm that you repeat 3 times, and it sounds like this: 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and 4 E and a 1. I was ignoring the dynamics, just playing the rhythm. That's a nice, distinct concert interpretation at that tempo, where we still got two distinct grace notes. Don't close it up so much that it's 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and 4 E and a 1. Don't buzz those grace notes, okay? And don't open it up so much that the grace notes up so much that it sounds rudimental, like this. 1 E and a 2, 3 E. I actually counted that wrong. I played it correctly, but I counted 3 E and that was wrong. So instead of that, we want 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and 4 E and a 1. Okay? Now, as we get to a faster tempo, the differences between rudimental style interpretation of things and concert style interpretation of those grace notes in a rough or a drag, they start to blur. There's less you're able to distinguish between the two less because there's less time to create separation, more separation between the notes for a rudimental approach, because the tempo is just faster. Things are moving faster. There's less time between notes, so they can start to kind of sound the same. So, but you're trying in your interpretation of this, your performance, to lean toward a tighter, more concert style roughs. That's it. Okay. Buzz rolls, nice tight, closed up drags without buzzing them. Okay. The first measure sounds like this. If our quarter note is here, 1, 2, that's me tapping my foot. The first measure sounds like this. 1 and 2 and start soft, go. 1, a 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 E and 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and 4 E and a 1. Okay? That's the first line with dynamics. Starts piano, nice and soft, and then we've got a little crescendo at the end of the second measure, and then we decrescendo during that third measure. Let's jump ahead to the second line. Okay, now we're at mezzo piano, a little bit louder than we started the beginning of the piece. Hopefully you can tell a little bit about what the dynamics are, even though I'm playing on the pad. And here we go. Second line sounds like this. 1 and 2 and ready and go. 1 and a 2 and a triplet, 4 E and a 1 and a E and a 3 E, a E and a 1 and E, and E and. Okay, starts mezzo piano. In that last measure, measure 6, which is the third measure of the second line, measure 6, we've got a crescendo where we get to our loudest point in the etude. Now, when I counted that measure, it's full of 16th notes with accents. 16th notes all the way from all the way from beat 1 to the end of 4. I was just counting the accented notes just then. I went 1 and E and E and. If I was to count all the 16th notes, it is 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and. Okay. This is a place where it's worthwhile, in my opinion, to think about your sticking a little bit. I'm approaching it with what we refer to often as natural sticking. It's just alternating sticking, starting my right hand, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left throughout. That means that if you approach it that way, your accents will be right, right, left, left, right, left, right. 1 E and a 2 E and E and. Put a crescendo in there, okay? Moving on. Let's look at the third line. This is measure 7. We're now at mezzo forte. So we just got to fortissimo at the end of the second line. We've got to bring it back just a notch or so, to a couple of notches, to mezzo forte. I'm going to apologize in advance if I stumble at the end of this line, because it's kind of hard for me to slow this thing down and count through it while I'm tapping my foot. I can play it most certainly, but sometimes when I'm trying to do all 3 things at once, I might stumble. I might have to take a couple of passes at it. So Let's see how I do. At the same tempo, 1 E, 1 E, and 2 E, and 1 and 2, and here's measure 7, go. 1 and 2 E, and 3 E, and 4, and 1 E, and 2 E, and 3, and 4 E, and 1, and 2 E, and 3 E, and 4. Oh, I messed up the very end. 3 E, and 4. That's how you play the last part. The buzz roll, again, sounds kind of choppy because of the slow tempo, and I'm still keeping the meter as 16th notes under the buzz roll. That's probably the trickiest part of what we're doing here. The last 2 beats of measure 9. If you were to play it without the buzzes, it sounds like this. 3 E and 4. Right, left, right, left, right. That's the sticking I'm using. But what we have to do is buzz the E and the and of beat 3. So buzz 2 of those strokes, the second and third stroke that we play. 3 buzz, buzz, left, right. 3 buzz, buzz, of 4. 3 E and of 4. When it gets faster, it smooths out. 3 E of 4. 3 E of 4. Okay? Please note that you've got the same figure at the end of measure 2, 3 and 4 E and that's the same figure that you have at the beginning of measure 3 of I say measure 2. Measure 2 of that line, measure 3 of that line is truly measure 8 and measure 9. In measure 8 you've got 3 and 4 E and beginning of measure 9 you've got the same thing, but there's some accents that we've got to hear when you do it at the beginning of measure 9. 1 and 2 E, and make sure you put those accents in there. Okay, now moving on to the last line, measure 10. We're back to piano again. We're nice and soft. We've got a little crescendo up to a moderate mezzo forte at the end of measure 2. Then we go back soft, and we end it really, really loud. Let's see if I can tap my foot and count through this thing. Here we go. 1 and 2 and ready, go. 1, triplet 2 and triplet 4, triplet 1, triplet 2 and triplet 4 and 1 and 2 E, 3 and 4 E and I flubbed my drag there. My bad. Try that again. At the very end it should have been 3 and 4 E and I won't play the whole line again. You can rewind it and watch that again. I just missed the grace notes on my drag. 3 and 4 E and in the last measure of the piece. So my apologies there. I'll go back and point out some highlights. Speaking of that very last measure in the piece, the time. Be sure that you're counting the timing correct on those first 2 notes. It's 1 and 2 E. 1 and 2 E and okay, first one's on the and of 1, the second note's on the E of 2, and then you've got 3 and 4 E and Nice crescendo, there's no release. It ends on the of 4, there's no beat 1 of the next measure, okay? The triplet figures in the first, in measures 10 and 11, I think should be something that you guys should already know how to do. And I counted through it just a moment ago. But when we get to beat 4 in measure 11, there's something that's can be a little tricky for some people. What we've got is a dotted 16th note, followed by a 32nd note, followed by an 8th note. Now, what that is, the first of those 3 notes, the first one comes on beat 4, the last note comes on the and of 4, but the second note actually exists between the E of 4 and the and of 4. So it's not right on the E, it's halfway between the E and the and, the last note that we play. So we have to think about the E, or have that timing in our mind somewhere, and put the note right after E. So the way I usually count that is I still count it 4 E and. I count it like it's 4 E and, like nice even 16th notes. I still use the syllable E for the second note, but I shift it over just a little bit. I know what the timing feels like. I still use the syllable E, and I say, instead of saying 4 E and, I say 4 E and, 4 E and. So that's what it should feel like at this tempo. Triplet, 4 E and. I accented before it, I shouldn't have. Triplet, 4 E and. Triplet, 4 E and. Sorry, both of those notes are accented at the end. Okay? Now again, I'm saying E, but it's not truly where we normally think of E. It's shifted over a little closer to and. Okay? That's what it sounds like. Triplet, 4 E and. Triplet, 4 E and. 3 and 4 E and. Okay? All right, so that's the breakdown of the Etude. Let's see if I can play this thing kind of slowly from beginning to end, counting through it, and then I'll try to play it on the drum at the actual tempo. Okay? Here we go. 1 and 2 and ready, go. 1, 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 E and 1 E and 2 and 3 E and 4 E and 1 and 2 E and triplet 4 E and 1 and E and 3 E and 1 and E and 1 and 2 and 3 E and 4 and 1 E and 2 E and 3 and 4 E and 1 and 2 E and 3 E and 4. 1 triplet 2 and triplet 4 triplet 1 triplet 2 and triplet 4 and 1 and 2 E 3 and 4 E and hey, I pulled it off. There it was. I think all the key elements were there. Again, the buzz rolls sounded a little more broken than we like for them to, because I was using 16th note meter at this really slow tempo. And if I was truly performing it at this tempo, I would probably shift to a quicker meter, probably sextuplets, maybe even 30-second notes. But I kept it at 16th note meter so you can see how I'm recommending you move your hands as you approach the target goal of quarter note being 110 beats per minute. Okay. Speaking of tempo, real quick before I play the goal tempo, it says this on the page I'm going to upload, but the goal tempo is 110 beats per minute, the quarter note being that. If you need to play it slower to execute it correctly, to play accurate rhythms, accurate dynamic, to have clear articulation of what you're playing, then you should do that, okay? In order to achieve the highest possible score on this assignment, you should play it at the goal tempo of 110 beats per minute. But do not, as always, like I always say, do not sacrifice accuracy of execution in order to just obtain a faster tempo, okay? Accuracy matters more than speed, okay? All the other musical elements need to be there before you add the musical element of a specific tempo that you're targeting, okay? Whatever tempo you do play it at, make sure you maintain that tempo throughout, that it's nice and even, steady tempo, okay? Okay, let's see if I can pull this thing off at the actual tempo. I'm going to shift to the drum now. I might not count all the way through it because it's hard to do that at speed. Hopefully you'll be able to follow where I am. I'm going to put a little handkerchief on the drum. I'm going to turn the snares off so there's a little bit more clarity of of sound. We should have a little bit more of a dynamic range here. Turn the metronome on. Not like that. Let's turn the metronome on 110 beats per minute. I might take a pass or two to get myself acclimated to the tempo. There it is. Let me see. Okay, that was a decent start. Maybe I should have kept going. Here we go. 1, 2, 1. No, that's not right. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 Okay, let's pause for a second. that was pretty okay. There were a smattering of few little things in there that I would like to have done better, particularly at the end of the first line. As I stepped into measure 3 on the very first line, I wasn't quite ready to play that drag on beat 1. I was a little bit late, a little bit off the metronome. So I want to try to execute that again. The other thing is my dynamics. I don't know that I made it enough of a distinction between piano and mezzo piano. Piano is my softest volume on this piece. Mezzo piano should be a little louder between it. So I don't know that I made enough of a distinction. So try to do that as well as you can. Let's see if I can catch that first line again and make those improvements. Here we go. Here we go. 1 and 2 and ready, go. Did you hear me play the rhythm incorrect at the very end? In the very last measure, I played 3 E and 4 E and it's actually, I shouldn't play on the E of 3. 3 and 4 E and I got it right in my first run, but I messed that part up in my second run. That last measure should be 1 and 2 and ready, go. And E, 3 and 4 E. 1 and E, 3 and 4 E. Alrighty, mistakes happen, but for the sake of this video, since it's all done in one big long take, I'm not going to re-record the video. I recommend that if you make little mistakes like that, if that's something that I was recording to submit for a grade, and I wasn't doing 25 minutes of talking and teaching in front of the playing, I would re-record it until I got a nice clean run where everything sounded the way I wanted it to. I will save you guys and myself the time it would take for me to do 3 or 4 reps of it to make it absolutely perfect. I think it was pretty close. If you can do it as well as I did, and I think in that second run, without that rhythmic mistake at the end, you should get the highest possible score. Okay? You guys keep drumming. I hope that you're practicing. You're not letting your skill set decrease or atrophy, and that any other exercises that we've handed out throughout the year, marching band type of stuff, 16th note timing, 16th note accent stuff, the triplet accent grid. You should be working on all those things to keep your hands in good shape. Pick both the 16th note accent grid and the triplet accent grid, and put other things in place of them, in place of the accents. Put flams in there, put diddles in there. Practice other double stroke roll exercises like chicken in a roll, 1 and 1s, 2 and 2s, 4 and 4s. I won't demonstrate all that stuff again now, but I hope you guys are doing things to keep your hands moving and your drumming. Okay? Again, link to the music the sheet music is in the description below. Hope you guys are doing well, and we'll see you next time.